so now we're going to discuss some alternative building materials and products. Paints, sealants and glues. So paints, sealants and glues are the primary cause of poor indoor air quality in new homes because they emit semi-VOCs, not just volatile organic compounds, but semi-VOCs which tend to off-gas for much longer. As such, they are a high priority to address. Now, there are lots of alternative paints on the market. Well, let's go sealants and glues here. We'll go through it just now. Basically, characteristic of an ideal paint, sealant and glue, is that it's low in semi-volatile organic compounds. That's a very difficult thing to find out. They don't list semi-VOCs. They don't have to list semi-VOCs. When they say it's low VOC or no VOC, they don't have to take the semi-VOCs into account. So it's a very difficult thing to know. It doesn't contain fungicides, which will alter the microbial genre. This is a very important point to pick up on because these paints that are so-called sensitive choices, or the paints that are so-called, they're supposed to be good in terms of sensitivities, but really they are real issues. The reason why they call them sensitive paints are because they have a fungicide, which is quite paradoxical because you're saying it's sensitive. If you're sensitive, this is a good paint to use, but we've put a pesticide in there, specifically a fungicide to inhibit mold. Now what they've found is these paints that are antibacterial, antifungal, in our opinion are ridiculous. The big reason is because in the United States, where this has been around for much longer than it has here currently as we do this interview, they have found now that they are detecting molds that they've never seen before. Molds that have evolved and are now have mycotoxins they've never seen before, types of molds they don't recognize. They can't identify them as Aspergillus or Stachybotrys or whatever the case might be. They've never seen these molds before. And they believe it's because they're evolving because of the amount of fungicides that are being put into building materials and paints and so on. So it's a real problem. If you're trying to look at minimizing mold and moisture, you don't go to the paints to do that. You don't put it anti-fungicide in your paint all over your house. That's not how you deal with mold and moisture. There's a whole mold course, and that's what you need to deal with: the moisture and dehumidify and take the moisture out, but you don't put paints on. They're even putting it on plasterboard. I just had to specify for a client the other day who said it costs $8,000 more to use the sensitive plasterboard, what they term as sensitive plasterboard. So I phoned the manufacturer, lovely people, very open about everything, but said basically that plasterboard, the main reason why it's sensitive and has the National Asthma Foundation butterfly stamp on it, which is something I'm willing to mention because I've seen the National Asthma Foundation stamp on paints as well that have these chemicals that, like triclosan, which are actually linked to asthma. And I've contacted them, spoken to them. And I just don't have as much faith in the National Asthma Foundation stamp, put it that way. So basically, in terms of the paint, don't look at the sensitive National Asthma Foundation stamp. They potentially don't look deeply into the core ingredients and whether they can cause asthma and the chemicals that are in each and every product that they put the stamp on. But please be very mindful of that. No fungicides in the paint. It's hygroscopic, so it doesn't contribute to condensation and mold-related problems. A breathable paint is critical. So again, because if you get a nice breathable building material that you've used, if you're then going to put a plastic paint on there, you destroy the hygroscopicity and the breathability and diffusion rate of that material. So it's very important to use something that is breathable when it comes to paints. You will see that there is no shortage of low VOC, no VOC, alternative eco paints on the market. Balvac, biopaints, Colours by Nature, E-Colour, Chyme, Livos, Mythic, Oikos, Rockcoat, Volvox, there are plenty. They all have advantages and disadvantages, and you will often find that you'll use some paints for some applications like timber and use other paints for other applications like plasterboard. Now Balvac is a magnificent paint, for example, in Germany, but it's distributed, I think they're in Perth. I've used them a few times. Very difficult paint to work with. You do need a painter who's had experience with it, who knows it, or they'll throw up their arms and walk off. We did find someone who had a lot of experience with Balvac and loved it. Their pigments are natural from the earth. So when sun falls on it, you'll almost see like crystals. It'll hit the little crystal stones, and the light that comes off that paint and is just magnificent. Colours are very natural, but very difficult to work with. It is very breathable. It's a lovely paint, but you need to find an expert in it and use it on particular surfaces that it can be used on. Biopaints, again, are also in my opinion, one of the better options, particularly for timber. They have a very good paint, very passionate down there about not being acrylic and sealing in plastic. Really should be supported, I believe. So biopaints are a good option as well. Colours by Nature, I haven't had much experience with them. E-Colour, I've had some experience. A lot of people have been happy with E-Colour, but again, the breathability is very important. Chyme, Livos, Mythic, the Pentagon was painted in Mythic paint. That's their big claim to fame because there's such strict standards in terms of VOCs that they had in that Pentagon, and they chose the Mythic paint from that VOC point of view. So they bang the drum from that point of view. Oikos I found a bit watery and so on, but difficult to mix and get right every time. And a lot of the paints, they are difficult to get the colours the same again. They say it's easy, but it's often not. Rockcoat produces paints that are toxic, paints that aren't toxic. Very passionate, very nice company up in Queensland. Their clay paints I've had a lot of success with. Clients have been very happy with the clay paints, very breathable, and their natural renders. Rockcoat have some lovely ranges, but it's sold in Bunnings, and you can get just the run-of-the-mill type in Bunnings, and not the sort of eco and more clay paints and so on. So just be careful what you order. Basically, you must always get a sample pot, because with paints, although it seems the easiest, there's so much choice, it's probably the most difficult part of specifying, because everyone thinks something looks better or worse. So what is really appealing aesthetically for one, another client will think it looks like a dog's breakfast. And the more natural the paint, the less durable it is. So you will see marks on it and you'll have to retouch it up all the time. So are you willing to do that, or you're not interested in that at all? The more plasticky and acrylic-y it is and sealing it is, the much easier it will be to wipe things off with. So with people with kids and families say, I am not getting natural paints because they just wreck the place and I want to easily clean it. Others say, no, they're the kids. I want it no toxic, so get me the most non-toxic stuff. I don't care about touching up or some marks. So people are very different in terms of what they are happy with and what they're not happy with. And so it's very important to give all the advantages and disadvantages. Always go, the Green Painters Association is a very good association. Daniel Worm, I think, who is the president now. Whether he is when you see videos, I don't know. But Daniel is lovely. He's been steering that ship for a long time. And they have very good knowledge. And they have worked with all these paints. So if you're going to use them, that's what I'd advise, to go and get advice from them and say, this is what I want to paint. This is where I'm based, my climate. Which paint would be best, and they will give you very good advice. So, Building Code of Australia doesn't consider movement of water vapour through the building envelope. That's really important. You need to consider breathability and diffusion rate, intelligent vapour wrap, microclimate of area. Consider the Intello wrap, Intello Plus by ProClimer. and we've got a link to that. So in the building envelope unit, I went through this in quite a bit of detail. But this is a problem with a lot of buildings in Australia, and studies have been done on this. It's a big problem. I even saw that the plasterboard manufacturer who brought out this fungicide, this sensitive plasterboard, they did a big study of their own. And I forget the exact figures, but they found that in Australian homes across the board, I think the figure was around 30% were adversely affected by mold. And the bedroom came second after the bathroom in terms of the area affected. And that's why they've produced this product. As I said, that's not the answer. You've got to deal with it another way. But the building code do not address this. They don't consider water vapor through the building envelope and the movement of that. It's at this stage, 2018, that it's still a problem. Let's hope that gets fixed. But that's why we spoke in great detail. Go to the building envelope, and this is what I've discussed in great detail there, where you need this breathable membrane. Flooring tips derived from natural materials. Underlays should be made from jute, coir, sisal, not recycled materials like tyres. The underlays these days are so much, they are urethane, just a polyurethane foam, type of rubber and a urethane foam that is really not ideal. I can't tell you the number of clients I've dealt with that as soon as they put in the carpets with that urethane underlay and the carpet, it's not all the underlay, and the carpet, they start having health issues. And on one of the jobs, I actually came across an elderly gentleman who's had an enormous amount of experience, particularly in government buildings. And he interestingly said that as soon as the carpets went in to a building, the complaints on health effects went up. So ideally, carpets are avoided. There's really no getting around it. A carpet is a carpet, but there are alpaca carpets, and there are natural wool, and there are blends and so on. But really, carpets are a little bit of a disaster, in my opinion. If you can possibly get away with it, and usually you can't, because someone in the couple who are building the house really, or both, really want carpet. You really want to get out the bed and stand on a nice, soft, lush carpet. Makes you feel warm and lovely. And it does. It's lovely from that point of view. But the underlays are a big problem. But you can get underlays from jute or coir or sisal, and recycled fabric as well. They used second-hand clothing, and it's fabric and it's needle punched. There's no urethane foams or anything like that. So you can get those underlays. In terms of the carpet, you can get alternative carpets like alpaca. Valerius here in Victoria do alpaca. I experimented and got a rug, very expensive. It sheds like crazy. That's a big disadvantage. It sheds for years, not months, not weeks, but for years. So that's a problem, that constant shedding. You always see these tumbleweeds of alpaca around the house, and it's terrible. No matter how much you vacuum it, it takes an enormous amount of time. And that I just used a rug on, and we were getting that all the time. So that's a big disadvantage in terms of, even though it's a lovely, natural, beautiful product, it's lush, it's warm. When we spill stuff on it, it just cleans up so easily. Alpaca also doesn't have the barbs in it, so the static is a hell of a lot less on alpaca, much less than wool, which if you look under a microscope is almost barbed and creates a lot of friction. And of course the synthetics do that too. So it's very hard when people say what carpet is best. You always want to say the alpaca, but that's the issue with shedding. Are you willing to put up with it? Otherwise it's not dyed at all. A lot of the VOCs come in from the dyes and the colorants on the carpet. And a lot of it comes from its shedding, the issues, the health issues. I've been dealing with a couple of clients where the issues have come where we test dust levels, and as soon as we put the dust monitors on the carpet, enormous amount, where if you just shuffle your feet slightly and you just get all of that. And over time, that carpet will collect an enormous amount of dust. And new carpets, you'll find there's this debate that it's actually good for air quality, because when you put new carpets down, there's a lot of static. It actually pulls all of the pollutants and particles and whatever's in the air into the carpet. And that is true. We don't take mold samples for a month when carpets are new because they'll be very low. That's all in the carpet. But it's all in the carpet. If you put a microscope to that carpet, you wouldn't sit on it. You'd pull it straight up if you saw what was going on in there. So carpets, that's the issue. You can get some rugs, you can bang the rugs outside, it's a hell of a lot better, but try and get something neutral like floorboards with maybe a couple of rugs would be a lot better. Nailed, so flooring tips that they nailed, and glues and paints should not emit semi-VOCs, and that it's hygroscopic. So secret nailing on floorboards is better using a natural oil. Livos produce magnificent oils, quite expensive, but produce very, very good oils for the floors. So there are biopaints, do some oils as well. So there are some good non-toxic oils out there in terms of the flooring. Should be derived, so furnishings should be derived from natural fibers that do not contain flame retardants. And yeah, good luck in sort of finding furniture with no flame retardants or treatments. They are out there. There's organic cotton, there's hemp, bamboo, linen, wool, leather, although be cautious with the tanning agents and treatments, and natural rubber. But furniture and furnishings are difficult, very expensive, very limited range if you do find anything. But if you can, that's what needs to be done in terms of furnishings. Bamboo. So bamboo is very widely used now. It's very common. It's very strong, very hard. Few, if any, pesticides are used. They don't use pesticides on bamboo. No VOCs, if not sealed. So to find natural, a lot of the boards come out of China and they have been pre-treated and they are formaldehyde based. So you need to be very careful where that bamboo is sourced. It's quite hard to find bamboo that's unfinished and natural. Not radioactive, it certainly isn't. It's renewable and sustainable, grows so quickly. It's just a great product. It can warp though. When you put it on the floors, you have to be very mindful how you clean it. It warps quite easily, quite quickly. So you have to be very careful in terms of the cleaning. That's a big disadvantage. And it may require toxic glues. Usually does require gluing together. Also the process, we often get asked about bamboo fabrics and so on. To form bamboo into a fabric or product is usually quite a chemically intensive process. You need to break down that fiber and then glue it back together and so on, and get it to form together and be hard. That process can sometimes be quite chemically intensive. So you just need to be a little bit careful on the degree to which bamboo is used and where it's used. But what a magnificent product when you just look at it as bamboo as a product. Cork. Cork has a lot of people do put down, alternatively speaking, they put down cork floors. Cork is widely used. It's durable and it's warm and it's resilient. It's derived from a natural material, the tree bark. It's fire and mold resistant. It's flexible and it's soft. It's long lasting. It's a renewable source. It's quite easy to maintain. Very low VOC if not sealed, although it always gets a sealant. It's not radioactive. Requires a sealant, to prevent moisture exposure, so that's the only problem. Although you can get more natural sealants, you can speak to Livos and companies like that to see what they have in terms of cork. They've tried on many different materials. Will expand and contract with changes in temperature and humidity, so it will change, which I don't think is a bad thing, but builders are nervous. Should not be installed on concrete without a vapor barrier. So really, on top of concrete, you've got to always be careful with anything that's porous because concrete is always going to potentially give off some moisture. So a vapor barrier is always important. Hemp. Oh, hemp is such a magnificent product, magnificent material. It's strong. The advantages are almost endless. It's very strong, it's hard, it's durable, really, really long lasting, particularly hempcrete. Hempcrete is something I really am looking at building my next house with. Kevin MacLeod used it on some low-cost housing that he did in the UK, where he stumped up his own money, was quite nervous on what to use, and he used hempcrete there and was pretty happy. He took the gamble on hempcrete and everything was hempcrete there. and seem to go very well. Hempcrete's been around a long time. There's nothing ultra new about hempcrete. It's so strong, so antibacterial, antifungal. It grows locally here in Australia. You can grow it now here in Australia, and you can use it if it's used like this for building materials and so on. So hemp you can source locally. It grows so quickly, and you don't need to use a large piece of land to be able to get enough hemp to do your walls and floors and so on. It's very sustainable from that point of view. Very few pesticides. It's very pest resistant. The pests don't enjoy it. There are no VOCs. It's not radioactive. It's very breathable. Renewable, sustainable, antifungal, antibacterial. And if you put a natural lime render, that's been the downfall to the hemp in terms of a building material for walls and that type of thing, is how you finish it on the outside in the render. But a lot of claim to perfect that now, that where it doesn't crack and have those issues. So if you can get that render right, and you make sure you get the mix right, there's no cement, obviously. The hemp very much replaces the cement. So hempcrete is just a magnificent product and very insulative. So the insulation properties are fantastic on hemp. It's very hard to find disadvantages in terms of the hemp, and a very long list of advantages. Linoleum. So the advantages, people often mix up linoleum and vinyl because they look very, very similar. Vinyl being a disgusting product and linoleum being actually quite natural, and a lot of advantages, natural linoleum. A lot of people struggle with that word. Biodegradable, resilient, and it's flexible. It has low VOCs. It's very durable in high traffic areas. It's naturally waterproof, good fire resistance, naturally antibacterial and dust mite resistant. No static, or naturally anti-static. It's warm and it's comfortable. Some people don't like the look of it. Some do. But you do need some pretty heavy glues to glue that big roll down. So you roll it out and you've just got to put tons of glue and press it down. So you do need some pretty strong hard glues like that are usually toxic glues that are commercially available. I'll never forget one of the Kevin McLeod series where he went all natural building a shed. He made his own glue, and I forget the ingredients he used, and he was balancing on it, supporting his own weight and so on. So it is possible to make glues that are natural, but to find it in the commercial market, very, very difficult. And that is the end of the alternative building materials.